The air was sharp that day. January's chill bit through layers of wool and cashmere as thousands of people gathered at the National Mall, their breath visible in the frigid air. Flags rippled in the wind, a sea of red, white, and blue stretching as far as the eye could see. The energy was electric, supporters cheering, cameras flashing, history unfolding right before them. Barron Trump stood beside his father, his posture straight, but his hands shoved into the pockets of his overcoat. He had been coached on how to stand, how to smile, how to absorb the weight of the moment without showing too much. At just 10 years old, he was used to the cameras, the watchful eyes, the whispered comments. But he wasn't thinking about any of that now. Something had pulled his attention away from the podium. His gaze swept over the endless crowd, over the waving banners and raised phones, until it stopped just for a second. There, a few rows back, stood a woman wrapped in a thick scarf. Unlike the others around her, she wasn't holding up a sign or a phone. She wasn't chanting or clapping. She was just watching, and she was watching him. Barron felt a jolt in his chest. He knew that face. It had been years, but there was no mistaking those kind eyes, the quiet warmth behind them. They had once been a fixture of his everyday life, a comforting presence in a world where people always seemed to expect something from him. His third-grade teacher. Her name came back to him in a rush, Miss Holloway. For a moment, it was like the crowd faded away. The cheers, the speeches, the historic weight of the day, it all blurred into the background. He was no longer the president's son, standing at the center of the world. He was just a kid again, sitting in a classroom where learning had felt like an escape, where someone had looked at him not as an extension of his famous last name, but as a boy with thoughts and dreams of his own. She looked different now, older, tired. The scarf was pulled up over her chin, but he could still see the softness in her face, the same quiet encouragement she had always carried. But there was something else in her expression now, something he couldn't quite place. Pain? Regret? Barron's heart pounded. She had been his favorite teacher, the one who had made school feel safe, who had treated him like he was more than just the son of a billionaire. The last time he had seen her, she had been leading his class through an art project, laughing as she wiped paint off a student's nose. And then, one day, she was gone. He had asked about her, but no one gave him a real answer, just vague responses about budget cuts, staff changes. It hadn't made sense to him then. Teachers didn't just vanish. But now, here she was in the crowd at his father's inauguration. Why? Barron swallowed hard, his breath fogging in the cold air. He wanted to look away, to refocus on the event, but he couldn't. His mind was already spinning, pulling him back to the last time he had seen her, the last words she had said to him before she disappeared from his life. But why did she look so sad now? And why did he feel like he was about to find out something he wasn't ready for? Barron's fingers curled inside his coat pockets, pressing against the fabric as he stood there, staring at her. The sounds around him, his father's speech, the applause, the distant hum of the crowd, felt like background noise. His mind had already left the present, drifting backward to a time when the world had been much smaller, much simpler. Miss Holloway had been different from his other teachers. Most treated him with a careful distance, as if they were afraid of saying the wrong thing in front of the billionaire's son. Others bent over backward to please him, their smiles too wide, their patience too rehearsed. But not her. She had never treated him like he was special, and that was exactly why he had liked her. He remembered the way she used to sit at the edge of his desk during quiet reading time, her eyes scanning the book he held. "You always skip ahead, don't you?" she had once whispered, catching him flipping to the last page. Barron had only shrugged, unsure if he was in trouble. "You want to see where it all leads before you decide if it's worth the journey," she had said with a knowing smile. "I get it, but sometimes the middle is where the real story happens." He hadn't understood what she meant back then. But now, as he stood here with a lifetime ahead of him and a past he didn't fully understand, her words echoed in his mind. She had been the only one who had noticed the way he loved to analyze things, books, puzzles, even people. The way he picked up on details others missed. The way he sat quietly, observing instead of jumping into conversations. While other teachers had pushed him to be more social, to speak up, she had simply let him be. "You don't have to be loud to be heard, Barron," she had told him once. "You just have to say the right things when it matters." But then she was gone. He had walked into class one morning, expecting to see her at her desk with her coffee and a stack of papers. Instead, there had been a substitute teacher with a strange smile and no answers. No one had explained why she had left. No one had told him where she had gone. For a while, he had thought about writing her a letter, but what would he have said? "Where did you go? Did I do something wrong?" Eventually, life had moved on. New teachers, new grades, new expectations. But he had never really forgotten. And now, after all these years, she was here, in this crowd, at this moment, watching him. But why? And why did it feel like there was something more beneath that quiet gaze? Barron's mind was still racing, but the moment was slipping away. The speeches continued, cameras flashed, and the weight of history pressed down on his young shoulders. He knew he couldn't just stand there staring, but the sight of Miss Holloway had cracked something open inside him, something that had been buried for years. He needed answers, but answers, he would later learn, weren't always easy to find. Miss Holloway's disappearance from his life had never made sense to him. Teachers didn't just vanish, not without a reason. What he didn't know at the time, what no one had told him, was that her life had been falling apart long before she left that classroom. Back then, Miss Holloway had been living paycheck to paycheck, like so many teachers across the country. The long hours, the endless grading, the after-school tutoring sessions, all of it was done out of love, not for the salary. And even though she had been one of the best, that hadn't saved her when the school board made budget cuts. She had received the news on a Friday afternoon. 10 years of teaching, gone in a 2-minute meeting. "We appreciate your service, but we have to make some difficult decisions." Difficult for who? Not for the ones signing the papers, not for the ones making the rules. For her, though, it had been everything. Losing her job had been the first blow. What followed was worse. She had been caring for her father at the time, a retired construction worker whose body had given up long before his spirit did. The medical bills were piling up. The rent on her small apartment in Columbus, Ohio, had become impossible to keep up with. With no other options, she had packed up her life, leaving behind the classroom she loved and the students she had invested years into, including Barron. She had wanted to say goodbye, had written a letter even. But when the school told her it was best if she didn't come back after the weekend, she hadn't been given a choice. And just like that, she was erased. For years she had wondered if any of her students remembered her, if they had ever asked about her, if they had missed her as much as she had missed them. She had followed Barron's life from a distance, not because of his last name, not because of his fame, but because he had been one of the few students who truly saw her. And now, standing in the crowd on inauguration day, she was seeing him again. He had grown taller, sharper features, the same observant eyes. But did he recognize her? Her heart pounded as she saw his gaze lock onto hers. Just for a second. It was enough. She knew she didn't belong here. She wasn't part of this world. She hadn't come with any expectations. But as she looked at him, something in his face told her the story wasn't over yet. Barron tried to focus, tried to listen to the speech still echoing across the National Mall, but his thoughts were somewhere else. The moment he saw her, something inside him had shifted. He wasn't sure if it was shock, nostalgia, or something deeper, but one thing was certain. He couldn't just let her disappear again. He had to find her. That night, after the celebrations, after the flashing cameras and the formalities, Barron sat in his room at the White House, staring at the ceiling. His mind kept circling back to the woman in the crowd. Was it really her? Had he imagined it? No, he knew that face. The next morning, he asked one of the security staff if there was a way to find someone who had attended the event. The man raised an eyebrow. Depends. Who are we looking for? For a second, Barron hesitated. How could he explain? He was the president's son. People would expect him to ask about world leaders, business executives, important figures. Not an old teacher who had vanished years ago. Just someone I used to know, he finally said. I think she was in the crowd yesterday. I just need to know if I imagined it. Security wasn't exactly in the business of tracking down random civilians, but Barron had learned something over the years. When you carry a last name like his, people find ways to make things happen. 2 days later, he had an answer. Miss Holloway, still in Columbus, Ohio, living in a tiny one-bedroom apartment above a laundromat. No steady job, no family left. Nothing about it made sense. How had she ended up like this? She had been one of the best teachers he'd ever had. Sharp, kind, patient. the kind of person who should have had a good life. And yet, here she was, struggling. Something about it made his stomach turn. Without thinking too much about it, Barron grabbed his phone and did something he had never done before. He called her. The phone rang twice before she answered. Hello? Her voice, he recognized it immediately. For a moment, he didn't know what to say. He had thought about this for days, but now that he was actually hearing her voice, the words stuck in his throat. Miss Holloway? A long silence. Then, who is this? It's Barron. He heard her breath catch, a pause stretched between them, thick with years of absence and unspoken questions. Barron Trump? Yeah. Another silence. I saw you at the inauguration, he said, filling the void. You were there, weren't you? I was. Her voice was softer now, cautious. I wasn't sure you saw me. I did. She let out a quiet laugh, one that didn't sound as light as he remembered. It's been a long time, she said. Too long, he agreed. He wanted to ask her so many things, why she had left, what had happened to her, why she looked so tired. But before he could, she spoke first. Why are you calling me, Barron? A fair question. He exhaled, gripping the phone a little tighter. Because I think I owe you something. But what Barron didn't know was that Miss Holloway had been carrying a secret all these years, one that would change everything. The weight in Miss Holloway's voice told Barron there was more to this than he understood. Something about the way she hesitated, the exhaustion behind her words. It wasn't just about losing a job. It was something bigger. Can I see you? He asked before he could overthink it. Another pause. You're the president's son, Barron. I don't think that's as simple as you're making it sound. I'll figure it out, he said. Just, please. She didn't answer right away. He imagined her standing in that small apartment, staring at the wall, weighing whatever it was she had been carrying for years. Finally, she sighed. All right. 3 days later, they met in a quiet cafe in Cincinnati, Ohio, a place far removed from the flashing cameras in grand halls of Washington, D.C. It was the kind of place where people didn't look twice at a stranger, where conversations were low and private. Miss Holloway looked different up close, older, yes, but also worn in a way that had nothing to do with age, the kind of tired that settled in your bones. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then she gave a small smile. You've gotten tall. Barron almost laughed. You used to say I'd be taller than my dad one day. Looks like I was right. The words were light, but her eyes weren't. There was something guarded in them. I want to help you, Barron said finally. I know things haven't been easy for you, and I feel like, I don't know, like I should have known, like I should have done something. Miss Holloway shook her head. You are a child, Barron. This isn't your burden. Maybe not, but I still want to help. She studied him for a moment, then exhaled. There's something I need to tell you first. She reached into her bag and pulled out a folded letter. I wrote this a long time ago, the day I had to leave the school. I never sent it. Barron unfolded the letter, his hand steady but his heartbeat picking up. The words were neat, written in the same careful script she used to put on the chalkboard. As he read, his stomach twisted. It wasn't just an apology for leaving. It was something more, something she had never been able to say out loud. I was fired because of you, Barron. The words hit like a punch. He looked up, confused. Not because you did anything wrong, she said quickly. Because I did something right. She took a deep breath, gathering herself. Do you remember that day in 3rd grade when you got into an argument with another teacher? Barron frowned, sifting through memories. And then it hit him. He did remember. A substitute teacher had made an offhand comment about his last name, a joke that wasn't really a joke. Something about how he didn't need to try in school because his future was already written for him. It hadn't bothered Barron at first. He was used to those kinds of remarks. But when Miss Holloway heard about it, she hadn't let it slide. She had confronted the teacher, demanded an apology, and in doing so, she had made herself a problem. I didn't think much of it at the time, she admitted. I thought I was just standing up for one of my students. But in a place like that, when you challenge the wrong people, you become an inconvenience. And inconvenient teachers don't last long. Barron's chest tightened. You lost your job because of me. No, she corrected. I lost my job because I refused to play along. You were just the excuse they needed. A silence stretched between them. Barron wasn't sure what to say. What could he say? I didn't want you to know, Miss Holloway said softly. I didn't want you to carry that. But now that you're here, now that you're asking, I can't lie to you. Barron clenched his jaw. He had spent years thinking she had just left, that she had moved on. But the truth was, she had been taken from him. And for the first time in his life, he realized power wasn't always about what you had. Sometimes it was about what was taken from you. But Barron wasn't going to let this be the end of her story. Not this time. Barron sat there, the letter still in his hands, the weight of Miss Holloway's words pressing down on him. He had spent years believing she had simply moved on, that life had taken her in another direction. But now he knew the truth. She hadn't left by choice. She had been pushed out because she stood up for him, and while she had lost everything, he had never even known. His fingers tightened around the paper. This wasn't fair. Miss Holloway, why didn't you ever reach out? He asked quietly. She gave him a tired smile. Because life doesn't work that way, Barron. You move on, you survive, you don't wait around for someone to come fix things. He understood what she meant, but something inside him refused to accept it. No, he met her gaze, his voice steady. Not this time. She frowned. Barron, you changed my life, he interrupted. And they took yours apart for it. That's not something I can ignore. He wasn't a kid in a classroom anymore. He wasn't powerless. And he wasn't going to let this be where her story ended. A week later, Miss Holloway got a call she never expected. A representative from one of the most prestigious private schools in Boston, Massachusetts, reached out, offering her a position, a full-time teaching role, full benefits, more than she had ever made before. She almost didn't believe it. We received a personal recommendation for you, the administrator had said. She didn't have to ask from who. But that wasn't all. Barron had also quietly set up a fund in her name, enough to cover her father's remaining medical debts, enough to make sure she never had to worry about money again. She hadn't wanted to accept it, but when she called him, her voice shaking, he had simply said, "You once told me you don't have to be loud to be heard. You said the right words at the right time for me. Now, it's my turn." For the first time in years, Miss Holloway allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, things were about to get better. And as Barron watched her step into a new chapter of her life, he realized something too. Power wasn't just about influence. It wasn't about money or politics or fame. It was about what you did for the people who had shaped you. It was about making things right. And this time, for the first time in years, he had. Some debts aren't measured in dollars. Some are measured in the quiet moments where someone sees you, believes in you, stands up for you when no one else will. And sometimes the greatest way to repay someone isn't with words, it's with action. Barron didn't just return the favor. He changed a life. And maybe in the end, that's the real measure of a person's worth. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Because sometimes, the right words reach the right people at just the right time.